What fan theory about a movie, TV show, or video game do you see as 100% canon? The reason the glass slipper in Cinderella didn't turn back to a regular slipper, or disappear, at midnight is because the fairy godmother was messing with us. Her main goal was to set Cinderella up for life, and to do that she needed a way for the prince to find her. She could easily have magicked Cinderella into the life she wanted, arbitrary midnight deadline be damned, but instead the fairy godmother decided to make the prince want her for her own qualities and to prove his love by tracking Cinderella down. It's like the theory in Aladdin that it's all in pursuit of his first wish, that is, to make Aladdin a prince. He doesn't become a prince until he marries Jasmine and the Sultan changes the rules. Until then, he only appears to be a prince. Until that point, the genie is acting in pursuit of a larger goal. Magic users are tricksy. Courage the Cowardly Dog doesn't really live in the middle of nowhere, but because of Muriel's age he never leaves their house or property. Every visitor is a monster because he of course, doesn't know them and sees them as a threat. In the Who Shot Mr. Burns episode of The Simpsons, Mr. Burns is discovered shortly after being shot and is surrounded by a number of characters, including Krusty the Clown. However, on close inspection it is absolutely irrefutable that it isn't Krusty at all, but Homer Simpson in Krusty makeup, compared to when Homer dressed up as Krusty while in clown college. Homer was actively on his way to kill Mr. Burns while disguised as Krusty, echoing when he saw Sideshow Bob rob the Quickie Mart while disguised as Krusty, but was beaten by mere seconds when Maggie shot him. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, in a chapter called The Forbidden Forest, Harry is saved from Quirrell/Voldemort by Firenze the Centaur. They encounter Bane and Ronan, who had previously remarked Mars is bright tonight, and the two centaurs chastise Firenze for interfering with what the stars had laid out. Harry later wonders whether the stars said that Voldemort would kill him in the forest that night, and whether that's what the centaurs believed would happen without Firenze's involvement. In the final book, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Harry realizes that his destiny is to be killed by Voldemort in order for the latter's Horcruxes to all be destroyed completely. He decides to go through with sacrificing himself for the cause, returning to the Forbidden Forest to confront Voldemort unarmed. The chapter ends with Voldemort successfully casting the killing curse at Harry, who appears to die. Although this is never explicitly stated or even implied at any point, my firm belief is that this encounter is what the centaurs read in the stars 6 years previously, not the one that happened in Philosopher's Stone, as they expected. What with divination being among the most difficult of magical arts to practice, they got the what right, mostly, but got the when completely wrong. The chapter in which Harry is killed is even called The Forest Again, probably as a reference to that first chapter in which his death was foreseen. Edit, shameless plug for our podcast, theorypodcast.com, where we talk about Harry Potter like it's English class. Jack from Titanic never existed, he was entirely made up by Rose as a fantasy. For a movie that puts so much effort into being as historically accurate as possible, one starts seeing a pattern where most of the mistakes revolve around Jack. He carries gear that hadn't been invented yet, he references places that didn't exist until after the Titanic sunk, and was all around exactly what a rich person would think a happy poor person was like, that it just makes way more sense that he was fictional even in universe. Copy/paste where I typed it out in a comment. She was getting married to someone she didn't love for the sake of money. Cal may not even have been that bad of a guy, but she didn't like him, so she tells everybody he was horrible. And then, well, it's the freaking Titanic, an event so mentally scarring and awful we're still talking about it over 100 years later. It was so awful she can't stand to think about it. Unless something good happened. And suddenly there is Jack. This lovable scamp that just sweeps her off her feet in a torrid romance with someone who loves her for her and not her money, where she learns that poor people have incredible dance parties and are happy, and everything is just so romantic and perfect. And the details about Jack are just wrong. Jack talks about riding the roller coaster at Santa Monica Pier until he threw up, but that coaster wasn't built until 1916. The Titanic sank in 1912. Jack talks about ice fishing on Lake Wissota. That's a man-made reservoir that wasn't created until 1917. The buttons on Jack's borrowed coat are actually from a famous designer that created them in 1922. The song they dance to in steerage was written by a man who wasn't even born until 1923. Jack's rucksack is a standard issue Swedish military bag. First made in 1939. Just over and over again the anachronisms and continuity errors circle around Jack. Things that a rich person thinks poor people would say or do, using places and songs and props that didn't actually exist at the time. Even other filming mistakes make more sense this way. We see Jack and Rose running around in the ship as it floods. The water is horizontal with the floor. The ship would have been tilting by that point, which means the water level should have been diagonal. Very hard to film that, but if Rose as a rich white woman was one of the first ones in a lifeboat, she would have been imagining what it would be like to be in a sinking ship, and hence her description would be wrong. AKA, Rose was making something up to help her deal with the horror she lived through and spliced the narrative together over the years after the fact. And the only solid evidence that even comes close to backing her story up, the drawing? It's not like it's signed by Jack. And it was found in Cal's belongings, safely tucked away. Which is more likely, that Jack is real and perfect in every way, and that for some reason jealous angry Cal got his hands on the drawing and kept it without ever mentioning it, or that maybe Cal had someone draw it while on the ship as glorified wank bank material and squirreled it away, and Rose just worked that into her fantasy. Joker in the Dark Knight trilogy was a former Black Ops soldier gone insane. It makes sense, due to his knowledge with explosives. He always changed up his backstory depending on who he is talking to, and during his interrogation, he made a comment towards Batman about not striking the person you're interrogating in their head. As if he has training and experience. Another reason is due to how when they checked for him on every known database he would not come up on any records. There's a thing about Black Ops soldiers: if they are declared missing, killed, or captured, their country will denounce any knowledge of their existence and they will likely be erased from all records. My personal guess he was declared missing. During the Joker's conversation he made a very specific example about the truck full of soldiers getting blown and the government says nobody panic. That was oddly specific, as if he was on that truck himself. Another example is when attempts to shoot the Gotham mayor with a rifle. At a rally it explains his familiarity with it. But as for where he got the training, he was clearly ex-Special Forces very likely, and then moved on to work for the CIA. But Christopher Nolan, the director, has yet to confirm or deny the theory, so he will forever remain a mystery. That toy is in the Toy Story universe frees up by instinct. An instinct that is so good it will probably never fail. It's why Buzz freezes up in the first film despite not knowing he's a toy, and how they always seem to be able to freeze up at the mere sound of a door opening and things like that. Every close call they have is really them worrying for no reason. If the human got closer to seeing them, the instinct would have kicked in. Also, they can break the instinct the same way we can manually control our breath, which is how Woody talks to Sid in the first film. In Ant-Man and the Wasp and the rest of the MCU, the reason Pym particles are so inconsistent in their behavior is because, when creating them, Hank Pym accidentally tapped into the same dimensional energy that Doctor Strange and his fellow sorcerers use, this time originating from the quantum realm. That Mr. Krabs is killing other crabs and that their meats are the secret ingredient of the Krabby Patty's secret recipe. 1. The Krusty Krab is designed after a real-life crab trap that fishermen use, and considering that the creator of SpongeBob was a marine biologist, I doubt that it's a coincidence. 2. We never actually see any other crab in Bikini Bottom apart from Mr. Krab himself and his mother. We see some crabs in special episode, but we never actually see one in Bikini Bottom on a daily basis. So Mr. Krab might be the one that killed them. 3. Mr. Krab may have invented the recipe, but we never saw him actually eat one, either because the thought of eating a member of his species disgusted him, or because he wants to avoid any health problem related to such a diet. 4. Real-life crabs, when stuck in the traps I talked about earlier, will often eat each other out of stress of being trapped there. 5. Mr. Crab is often considered an allegory of the American dream and an extreme form of the capitalist society. So doing something like a murder doesn't seem too far-fetched when we know how immoral the guy can be. 6. Mr. Crab did eat one of his own burger once and said, "So this is why I taste like," or something among those lines. He might have been joking. Or did he? 7. The name of the burger itself, the Krabby Patty. The Krabby Patty. Krabby. The name itself is already a big fucking clue. The official recipe of the Krabby Patty can be found and made at home, and that's where this theory started because the secret ingredient was designated as crab meat imitation. But the theory supposes that it's actually not an imitation for all the reasons stated above. Edit, to everyone doing references to the Bikini Bottom horror by you/Stillinth simulation, I wrote this comment knowing damn well about this story. I'm even one of this Redditor's followers, so yes, it's a good fan fiction, but the theory part stops itself at crab is using starfish meat because he actually know about biology or some shit. Except this doesn't work since we know for a fact that Mr. Crab invented it way before knowing who the fuck Patrick is, but semantics. The Minecraft lore, it says that there were people like you in this world before. They built temples, mineshafts and knew how to travel through the nether. The water was rising and destroyed many fishing villages. That's why you find ruins and religious monuments. Other villages were destroyed by a wither, that's why villages have ugly cliffs and holes. The last survivors who didn't drown, withered or got zombie-infected built shelters, strongholds, and got into the end. Their only food source was chorus fruits. After a long time they absorbed the teleportation power of the fruits and became Enderman. You should free the End from the dictatorship of the Ender Dragon. Edit, my interpretation of a theory by the game theorist. Dr. Doofenshmirtz is Phineas's, and probably Candace's, biological dad. We know that Doof dated Linda at one point. This would explain Phineas's uncomfortably shaped head, as well as his genius and his incredible mechanical aptitude. This one is entertaining but has mostly been debunked. We know that Doof and Linda dated prior to Linda's pop star career as Lindana in the 80s, as shown by their conversation at the drive-in theater. It's unlikely that they continue dating any time later on, seeing as the date was a flop. Given the time period the show takes place in, it's safe to assume that Phineas was born in the late 90s or early 2000s, well after the end of the Lindana days. All of the time manipulation in Breath of the Wild, pausing, flurry rush, bullet time, etc., are actually canon and are part of Link's champion ability. All of the champions have a special ability, and as the Hylian champion it makes sense for Link to have one too. There is a great video by Nintendo Black Crisis about this, https://www.youtube.com/watch v=TV5Z, so that explains most of this, but I wanted to add that this goes along with his character throughout the series. Link is strongly associated with time, e.g. Hero of Time, and the timeline split. Many of the games are associated with time, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and the official timeline is contingent on it. It fits the lore of Bot and explains why he is so overpowered, and I just think it's a really cool theory. That makes a lot of sense. I'd like to add a little bit that I read somewhere. The powers granted him by the Triforce of Courage are not super clear like they are from Zelda's and Ganon's pieces. The theory is that the power it gives him is what we see as a game over screen. He gets to die and redo whatever he needs to do to stop Ganon.